was one of the Kadampa masters. A Kadampa master was one of the early original disciples of Atisha, who was the second dissemination of Buddhism in Tibet, Atisha, Lama Atisha. So the Kadampa masters are very well known for being the forefounders of all the new translation schools. So they're the basis of the Kagyu, the Geluk, and the Sakya tradition. So those three schools all derive from these Kadampa masters. And they were also known for their discipline and commitment. They're very, they have this reputation of being, really dedicated. So you'll see in this text that it's kind of a strong text. It's something that really calls us on all of our stuff. I would say it really, what does that mean? Calls us on our stuff. It really challenges us to look at this self-grasping and this self-centeredness that we all carry automatically. And it does it in a strong way. And for that reason, sometimes people don't really like this text, because they're like, that's just ridiculous. That's not common sense. That's not the way most people have to behave in the world today. And so hopefully what I can bring out of this text today, what I'm hoping, is how we can apply it, even in our degenerated times. So as usual, let's start with a few minutes of silent meditation just to center ourselves, and then do some motivation. So go ahead and get comfortable, setting up your posture with that back loosely straight. And just removing the senses, coming in, turning inward. And then getting in touch with some relaxation. So letting that external world go for now. Maybe taking some deep breaths. And then, because this text is very much about compassion, we can bring to mind some of these sentient beings who are suffering so much in the world today because of what we do to ourselves, what we do to others. Thinking about how, although our contemplations today may not be able to directly affect the suffering of those beings, ultimately this is our why we're here. And because of that, indirectly, eventually, we will have an effect. We will be able to stop that suffering. And when we have that intention, it becomes powerful. It has this ripple effect. So bringing this heartfelt decision that in our work today, in our lives, that each action, each positive action that we do today will be for the purpose of alleviating that suffering. Especially for those who are so confused, so disturbed, and creating so much suffering for others. And then we have an assurance because we have this understanding of the interdependent nature of all things, that we are having effect, no matter how subtle, no matter how unseen. That by doing this, we are making a difference. So with that, we'll attend to these teachings, contemplate these teachings, be good students, open our minds to the possibility of our own transformation and the wisdom contained in this text. Okay, so you have on the website, there was a copy of the 8 verses in their traditional order. So if someone needs that text, please tell us in the chat and I can upload a copy of that for you. I have slides and I'll be going through it. But the first thing I wanted to tell you is that although there is a traditional or a typical way in which the 8 verses are presented, I'm gonna switch them up a little. So I'm gonna start with like verse 3 and then go to verse 6 and then, so hopping around a bit, because I feel like when we talk about practice and putting these into practice, this was the way that seemed most useful for me to put these verses into some way that I can start to apply them. And also, well, I'll talk about that later, but I think for us modern people with this, with the challenges we have of feeling helpless, feeling inadequate, not enough, the self-hatred, the low self-esteem, that is such a challenge for us modern people, that maybe switching up the verses in this way will help us to start to work with that and see how that doesn't have to be a hindrance to us developing the compassion, the bodhicitta, that is what this text is all about. The lojong, or the mind transformation, thought transformation, sometimes it's called lojong, is the Tibetan term. They're specifically for, they're kind of a radical way of developing this bodhicitta motivation. So quick review: bodhicitta motivation is the wish to attain enlightenment for the benefit of all beings. So we have those 2 parts of bodhicitta. One, the first part and the most important part, is this understanding that we are all in a difficult situation that we have these challenges because of the ignorance in our mind. And then the second part is then what are we going to do about it? What are we going to do about this all the suffering that we and all others are experiencing in this situation? Is that we have to progress. We have to become enlightened. We have to develop our minds. And so what makes this teaching, this Lojong, radical is that it directly attacks this self-grasping and this self-centeredness and this self-cherishing that is the source of all the problems. And it does it in a way that appears to be counterintuitive. A lot of the Buddhist teachings are counterintuitive when it comes to intuition isn't so good. It's more countercultural or counter, way everybody thinks. It's the opposite to the way most people think, because in our society today, in all of our societies, I feel like the focus is on how to take care of me, that I have to take care of me and I'm the most important. And if I don't take care of me, nobody else will. And in the Lojong teachings, we're shifting that, we're turning that around and saying, well, actually, if you want to be deeply and fully happy, if you want to actually solve your own and everybody else's problems, you shift that, you actually make others more important. And that is countercultural. It's like, but what about, survival? What about, this survival of the fittest, this evolutionary idea that we have actually has been polluted. I've been reading a little bit about this, that Darwin's original recognition was not survival of the fittest, but an understanding of how cooperation is how species survive. It's not through individuals. How this has been kind of changed. Okay. So let's take a look at this. So you have the text now, if you want to look at it. I'm going to start with verse number 3. So let's see if I can. All right, hold on just a second. I'm a little bit out of practice. No, I guess I have to do it this way. Share it first and then start it. Okay. Okay, so there's our thought transformation, Lojong. All right, so we're going to start with verse number 3. So verse number 3, and this translation, by the way, is done by our precious Lama Zopa. So it's available on the FPMT if you want another copy of it. So vigilant, the moment a delusion appears in my mind, endangering myself and others, I shall confront and avert it without delay. Now, the reason why I started with this particular verse is because mindfulness, awareness, presence is so important. And I feel like it's one of the things that is easiest. It's easiest for us to develop, to start becoming aware, because it doesn't take a lot of scriptural knowledge. It doesn't take a lot of fancy philosophical understanding to simply learn to be present in the moment, to be aware of what is happening with others and what is happening within ourselves. So Mingyur Rinpoche is a big proponent of simply learning to be aware of what is happening around us. So mindfulness meditation is not only an awareness of like our senses, what we're seeing, what we're touching, what we're tasting, and so forth, but also having an awareness of how we know that is happening, that our minds are actually present when we are having an experience of phenomena or of other people. So this this, like, it's, and because the mind only holds one thing in a moment, so it can only have, in consciousness, it can only have one phenomena or one thought in the mind at any one moment, even though we go through them very quickly. What we're doing here when we are practicing vigilance, when we are becoming aware of the present moment, is that we are not only mindful of our surroundings, but we're also mindful of the fact that our mind is present, that our mind is being aware of these things. And when we carry that mindfulness, right, that awareness of the mind, then we also start to bring in this sense of how the mind is spacious, how the mind is open, how the mind is clear, how the mind has understanding. And when we have that, we automatically relax. We automatically things become more open, and we start to move toward that ultimate realization that Buddhism presents, which is this emptiness of all things. So this present moment is so powerful. And then in this verse in particular, what we're talking about is our afflictions and how our minds they color all of our experiences. So not only do they have this basis of being open and aware, but they also have the ignorance, right? The delusions, the afflictions, because immediately the second step of having awareness is that then things are concrete, things are separate from me, things have this inherent existence, right? And the inherent existence then sends us into a spiral of either attachment or aversion. And so this first verse, verse number 3, asks us to start to develop that awareness that will challenge that typical way that we respond to things. So I have a situation in which very quickly irritation arises in me, or very quickly I really want something. Then what they're asking us to do is, okay, that appears, that's very fast, and it's pretty out of control, but let's develop some awareness of it. Let's develop some vigilance of it. And when we have the awareness, then at least we can challenge it a little bit. We can start to maybe counteract it a little. And having even the awareness that we have awareness, of the mind, this openness, that can start to contract, start to confront it, start to avert it. The other thing that's really helpful about vigilance is that we can start to become aware of other people's point of view. Now, this sounds easy, but it's interesting. Piaget, who was a psychologist who studied children in particular, and he has a developmental theory about how children start to develop cognitively in their minds. And this is very interesting because he talks about this shift from concrete, which is in the sense of what I see is real, and if I don't see it, it's not real, to abstract thinking, the ability to imagine in my mind something that is different, something that could be. And when we're talking about taking another person's point of view, this is actually a little bit more advanced thinking strategy. And he says that we don't fully develop this capacity until we are young adults, this ability to put ourselves in other people's perspective. There's a traditional American Indian proverb that talks about not judging others until you have walked a mile in their shoes. So this sense of how I can start to look at how others may be perceiving the same situation. So this vigilance can be very important with that. And this starts to avert, again, our typical way of seeing things as based on our delusions of attachment or aversion. When we start to see other people's point of views, again, it starts to open our minds up to that these situations are not so absolutely the way that we see them. So developing this vigilance, developing this this awareness of others' points of view, and then also by taking another person's point of view, we start to get in touch with their basic wanting to be happy, not wanting to suffer. That we are connected with them in the sense that they too want to be happy and don't want to suffer. So this, when we're decreasing our delusions, what it also does is we start to develop that interdependent, that connection to others, which is the basis, the love, basis of love, basis of compassion that leads us again to that bodhicitta view. And then finally, vigilance, taking the point of view of others, helps us to start to see the Buddha nature in ourselves and in others. So this is where Mingyur Rinpoche starts with this awareness of our own mind, which this emptiness of our mind, this clarity and the knowing first, and then the emptiness, that this is our Buddha nature. This is our ability to become Buddhas, because if our minds were not empty, if they were absolutely stuck, we could not grow, we could not become, we could not change. And so with vigilance, with becoming aware of our own minds and the thoughts within our minds, we can start to get in touch with that potential that is developing in us. And it also, I feel like when we do this, it also helps us to hear our own wise mind. In psychology, I don't know. Yeah. Is that where I got it? I think it was a blending. Anyway, that we often have many voices, of course, in our minds. We have many selves that are competing within our minds. But what we're trying to develop with this Buddha potential and this Buddha nature is an awareness of our own wise mind, our own positive sense, our own basic goodness, the part of us that connects to others, the part of us that knows that we aren't separate, knows that we aren't cut off from others. And then this becomes easier to grow that love and that compassion. So that's why I feel this vigilance is such an important way to start when we're bringing these verses to life. So I have a quote from Mingyur Rinpoche. Let's see. Feeling divided from ourselves and the world around us is the deceptive narrative of the grasping mind. But we can learn to let go of false hopes that leave us yearning for ease in our bodies and in this world. We can move beyond our discontent. We can replace longing with love. As I was just beginning to discover, when you love the world loves you back. So this is the whole message of the thought training, is this understanding that we can tolerate a little bit of discontent, a little bit of yearning, that we can move beyond it, that we can actually use it, use the difficulties, use the suffering to use it as a path to transform it, to make it into a happiness that is more lasting, that is more enduring, that is deeper felt, that is not affected by the changing circumstances in our lives. So often, because our minds go after things, they go out to our external world and they make that world concrete, our own sense of happiness becomes totally caught up in those external things. And what he's saying here is that we can start to transform that and turn that into something else. And that's what this whole text is about, is changing that, turning that, taking that discontent, taking that difficulty. And even, like Lama Zopa says, problems become like ice cream. We want the problems so that we have something to work with, so that we have something to transform. Okay. Again, it being very countercultural, this idea that we would actually want suffering, that we would actually embrace difficulty in order to grow, in order to become, in order to develop love. But that's what these teachings, and that's why they were considered fairly advanced teachings. They weren't shared. These 8 verses of thought transformation were not brought to light to the public until finally they were written down after Lama Atisha. But in India, they were closely guarded teachings because they were considered advanced, because it's like people would reject Buddhism is usually why it was. Okay. Because they were considered so radical. All right, so let's jump to the very end now, to the 8th verse. All right. Undefiled by the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns, may I, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, be released from the bondage of attachment. Okay. So now the reason why I skipped all the way to the 8th verse is because, for one thing, I feel like modern people who have a modern secular education, who have critical thinking, have the capacity to be introduced to emptiness pretty early in any teaching, because they can understand the reasoning, and because of the introduction of, in science, this understanding that the underpinnings of everything are, basically energy, that all of the particles that we're talking about in physics and atomic science are underpinned by energy. So this idea that maybe things don't have absolute concrete reality is not such a shocker for anybody who has some kind, a secular education, like most of us. I mean, I was introduced to atoms in, very elementary school. So we aren't as, it isn't as much as of a challenge for us to start to see that things don't exist in exactly the way that they appear as absolutely. And we won't necessarily fall as easily into that fear and that, that nothing exists, therefore there's nothing there, because we're already in our mind starting to get used to this idea that they're there, there is a chair there, there is a table there, there is a computer there, there's another person there. But what they are underneath them, what they're made of, is something not exactly the same as what they look like to us. Okay, but let's go back to the beginning of this one. So, undefiled by the stains of the superstitions of the 8 worldly concerns. So what he's talking about here is, of course, renunciation, definite emergence. So definite emergence is a better translation than renunciation, because renunciation comes from the theological language of the Christian monastics. This idea that you have to give up everything in order to make spiritual progress. And what we're talking about with definite emergence is this definite decision that the suffering that we're experiencing can be alleviated, that it can be changed, and that we want that more than anything. We want to get free of this situation that we're in. And even those things that we have culturally been taught that are the source of our happiness, that those things, they're temporary. And because they're temporary, they create a lot of suffering for us. So this understanding that, and the 8 worldly concerns are this, they're pairs. Okay. The first one we can talk about is being comfort. And I feel like that's such a big one for me, that I have this attraction to comfort, that's where my motivations lie all the time. And that I'm really afraid of being uncomfortable. Like, before I lived in India, it used to be very sensitive to cold. And I've really worked on it. I've actually worked very hard on it. And to the extent that I was always pursuing heat and always avoiding cold. And those were my motivations, instead of virtue, instead of kindness, instead of thinking about others. What am I thinking about? I'm thinking about my comfort and avoiding discomfort. And so these are what the 8 worldly concerns are. The other ones are wealth, making money, versus, and the other one, the opposite side of that, is being terrified of being poor. I mean, how often do we not practice generosity because we're afraid we don't have enough? This challenging this, right? And I can feel it even in me, like, well, you have to take care of yourself. I immediately feel that. But when we start, and this might be a good time to introduce this aspect of the teaching, is that no one is saying that you go to extremes. Okay. The Kadampas were not saying that you go beyond what you are capable of. Okay. But they are saying that you push yourself, that you challenge yourself. So when I hear myself saying, but I won't be able to take care of myself if I give this away, that is an extreme that I could challenge, right? I mean, how much do I actually need? And could I actually give away some of this? And this is what they're trying to challenge. This is what the thought transformation are trying to challenge. Because what they say, I hope you're following me in this, but what they say is that our self-centeredness and our self-centeredness is so strong and it's so ingrained that maybe we need to push it far to the other side in order to bring it more into balance. Okay, so the first point I made is that nobody wants you to take you to extremes in the sense of hurting yourself. Okay, that would not make sense, because that's ridiculous, from the perspective of the teachings, that you are a sentient being and we want all sentient beings to be happy. So it wouldn't make sense that we would destroy ourselves. Okay. The second point is that we have the intelligence to think critically, to know when we're going too far. Okay. To know when we are giving up so much, like, I give away all my possessions and I move to a cave like Milarepa, is an extreme that I'm not ready for, that I cannot do. But, giving $50 or whatever, to the world, food program for the people in Ukraine is something that I can do, something that is possible for me. If I look at money, I could probably give that up. But we immediately go to this, oh, but I have to take care of myself, right? So it's bringing in this discriminating intelligence that starts to challenge that ingrained self-centeredness, Okay. And this is what these 8 worldly concerns are very close to this ingrained self-centeredness. So the first 2 were comfort and discomfort. The second 2, wealth and poverty. The third 2 are praise and blame. So when we want people to say nice things to us. We don't want people to criticize us. And this controls a lot of our behavior. And the last one then is our reputation, what people are saying when we're not present. So they're saying good things about me, what people think of me. I get very worried about what people think of me. And of course, we don't want to go to the extreme where we're like alienating all the people in our lives because we don't care what they think of us. But we're also maybe challenging it a little bit, thinking, well, I'm going to make this decision because I know it's the right decision, even if they don't necessarily approve. I can sort of tolerate a little bit of their disapproval, of their criticism, of their thinking I'm not such a great person, because I know it's right within me. And this is how we start to work with these 8 worldly concerns. We start to use our awareness of these 8 worldly concerns to challenge that powerful, strong self-centeredness. And then the second part of this verse, may I, by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, be released from the bondage of attachment. Okay, so when they say all phenomena, they're talking about ourselves as well as our world. Okay, so this is, of course, the teaching on emptiness, and emptiness being the direct antidote to the ignorance that leads to the self-grasping, that sees the self as absolutely separate from all others, as permanent in some, unchanging in some conditions, that sees us then when we see ourselves as separate, as not interdependent. Okay, when we see ourselves in that way, and because we're so familiar with this body and mind, the self, then it becomes more important. And because it's more important, then my comfort, my good feelings, my happiness, they are more important than anybody else's. And attachment becomes about all these separate things that I think are going to make me happy, having to get them, right? Having to consistently, my way of pursuing happiness is through this attachment that is based on this view, this incorrect view that sees me as separate from all others, and that needs to, in order to feel good, get things, right? Or have other people say nice things about me, or somehow I have to, it's so funny, isn't it? How I have to constantly feel connected, right? It's such a buzzword these days, like, oh, I feel so disconnected. I'm loneliness, such a powerful disconnection. And when we go inside and we start to develop this awareness of our interdependent nature, we see you can't be disconnected. It's impossible. We don't exist that way. There is no such thing as disconnection. That self that believes that it's disconnected is an illusion. It's something that we make up based on that ignorance that sees us as separate. And just the source of all of our problems, this bondage of attachment. And it's so deep. It's so powerful. So let's challenge it. Then we start to go into how are we going to challenge this? So the 2 levels that we talk about in terms of this self-grasping is the 1 level, and that's the deeper level. Okay, that's the immediate. As soon as I have an experience of me, right, of experience of my body and mind, I immediately think there's a self, right? And I make that self, I elaborate on it. I make it more than it actually is. Instead of seeing it as simply a label on a body and mind, I take that label and I make it into an actual thing. And that actual thing is, again, seen as separate. And then the second level, so that's the first level, that self-grasping, grasping that self to be more than it actually is. And then the second level is I make it the self-centeredness. Traditional, or what has self-cherishing has been a translation of this. I don't really like that translation, because then that implies that we shouldn't cherish ourselves, and we should, by the way, because we are sentient beings, we deserve to be happy. But self-centeredness, I think, is a better translation, because it makes us the center of the universe and sets us off from others. Okay, so those are the two levels. So we want to release our self-centeredness, and we want to release our self-grasping. And by perceiving all phenomena as illusory, this starts to challenge that self-grasping, that very basic level. Now, when we get to the next slide that I'm going to look at, which is verse number 2, in the company of others, I shall always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart, hold others dear and supreme. What this one starts to challenge is that self-centeredness, okay? Because typically, what do? We walk into a situation, we want others to pay attention to us. We want others to see us as important. We want to be heard. We want to be recognized. We want them to take care of us. You know, we want to be loved, okay? No problem with those, okay? But they are, what they're doing is they're feeding that self-centeredness that is the result of that self-grasping. And what we can, okay. So why would we want to challenge the self-centeredness and the self-grasping? Why would we even want to do that? Because that is the source of all of our problems. So coming back to, let me back this up a little. Okay, so coming back to, why are we in this situation in the first place? Why are we in samsara? Why do we, what is the source of all of our problems? Is this ignorance, this self-grasping. And how are we going to get out of it? How are we going to free ourselves? Is by decreasing the afflictions, because the afflictions, like attachment, lead to the negative actions, karma, that leads to the suffering situation. And the negative actions, the results of some of our karmic actions, are to do the same behaviors over and over and over again. And that's why it's called bondage. That's why we're stuck in it, because each time we pursue that attachment, that incorrect view of seeing things as separate, and try to get something from it, the more we keep ourselves stuck in it. So that self-grasping and that self-centeredness, now we need to challenge it. We need to reverse it. We need to try to change it in order to free ourselves from the bondage. So this view, this slide that says, when in the companies of others, I shall always consider myself the lowest of all, and from the depths of my heart, hold others dear and supreme, starts to challenge that self-centeredness and that self-grasping that is the source of all of our problems. Okay, now, so many of us who are very kind, compassionate people have suffered from taking this to an extreme, right? We say, okay, I put others greater than me and I'm the lowest, so I'm the worst. right? I'm no good. I'm not enough. I'm a very bad person. We start to, sometimes we have these messages or we have these habits, and it's a phenomena of our modern society, of this degenerate age, that this lack of self-confidence, this low self-esteem, that it becomes a hindrance to our practice. Okay. So difficult, isn't it? It's like, well, I already consider myself the lowest of all. Why should I do it more? And it's only created more problems for me, right? This is why this text is considered, by many modern people, like it doesn't have any relevance for me, because here I'm already considering myself the lowest of all. Okay, so let's talk about this in one way. First of all, one way that we can consider this, and I think it's really relevant here, is this from the scriptures. They talk about pride. Okay, so pride is thinking you're better than everybody else, right? And it is also the result of self-grasping, self-centeredness, this understanding that I know me and I have all these qualities and I think I'm great. Okay. So it's a separateness, right, from others, and it's a step above. When this modern phenomena of self-hatred, of not feeling worthy, of feeling unlovable, is actually a reverse pride. It's a pride that thinks that I am worse than everybody else. I'm not equal to everyone. I'm not the same in being a sentient being as everyone. I am worse than everyone else. And that's a reverse type of pride, because when we start to have more of a balanced view, we can see that we have positive qualities and we have negative qualities. And those positive qualities, and our basic Buddha nature is our most positive quality. That's where our self-confidence should come from. This understanding that we can become, that we can change, that we can grow, that our minds are the same as a Buddha's mind, except for the ignorance that we're trying to get rid of. And when we recognize that it's the ignorance that is the problem, not me, okay, that's not the problem. The conventional, the me that actually exists, is not the problem. The problem is the ignorance. And what we're doing with this, when we're seeing myself as the lowest of all, we're challenging that self-centeredness. We're challenging that ignorance. Okay. So 2 types of pride. One that thinks that I'm better than everybody else. One that thinks I'm worse than everybody else. Okay. And then this balanced view that sees I am equal to all beings. In my Buddha nature, all beings want to be happy. But my problem, my ignorance, my self-centeredness is what needs to be challenged. And so when I'm with others, and what they're asking us to do, what the Kadampa masters are asking us to do, is start to reverse that self-centeredness, to start to challenge that ignorance that says, no, you're not the worst of everyone. You're not the greatest of everyone. But in this situation with others, because you're trying to make it more in tune with how we actually exist as connected to others. So what they're asking you to do is challenge that self-centeredness, push that self-centeredness to start to see in this situation, if I see myself as lowest of all, then I'm not going to get caught by my self-centeredness. I'm not going to be overwhelmed by my attachment. When I see myself as the lowest of all in others, then I am more likely to be aware of my faults and how I can improve, how I can not harm others, how I can be kind to others, how I can actually manifest that loving kindness, manifest that Buddha nature that wants all beings to be happy, including me. Okay. All right. Let's see, how am I doing on time? Okay. Let's do one more verse. Okay, verse number 1. So determined to obtain the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings who are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, I shall hold them most dear at all times. So common sense, or like, regular thinking is like obtaining the greatest possible benefit from sentient beings. We're using them, right? We're just using people. But what is our motivation? Why are we obtaining the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings? We are using them for their welfare, in order to develop bodhicitta, in order to become enlightened, so that we can benefit them. So this welfare, the scriptures talk about the welfare of oneself and others. Okay, your own welfare is to become enlightened, because that's the best happiness you could possibly have. The welfare of others is to bring them to enlightenment, because that's the most wonderful thing that they could have. So how can we get the greatest possible benefit from all sentient beings? Is by developing our bodhicitta, by developing the welfare of ourselves and others. And they are more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, because they are the source of all of our happiness. So a wish-fulfilling jewel was a mythical object that could bring you everything that you want. So whenever they say more precious than a wish-fulfilling jewel, what they're talking about is every possible wonderful thing you could imagine. And Lama Zopa says that these days a wish-fulfilling jewel is $1 billion, right? That's a wish-fulfilling jewel. So what could be more precious than being richer than the owner of Amazon, right? More precious would be something that kept you happy no matter what, right? No matter what, from the inside, enduring without stopping, right? More precious. And what they're saying is, when you hold sentient beings as more precious, this is what you will get. Not focusing on greed, not focusing on self-centeredness. So then holding them most dear at all times, seeing myself as the lowest of all, this is how I'm going to develop this happiness. This is how I'm going to, because it cuts the root of the problem, which is the self-centeredness, which is the ignorance, the self-grasping. Okay. All right. Okay, I'm going to stop there. And let's do a little bit of contemplation here. And then we'll do some questions on some of the advantages of cherishing others and the disadvantages of cherishing myself only, self-centeredness. So go ahead and get comfortable. Again, focusing inward for a bit. We can imagine Tenrezig, the Buddha of compassion, is here with us. We take refuge in and we rely on the teachings on compassion that we're learning here, knowing that they will solve our problems. And we can ask Chenrezig to send us his purifying and strengthening light, that we can manifest these positive teachings in our lives, make a difference in the world. And then we imagine receiving that we get that blessing. So we can start by contemplating the fact that others and ourselves, there's really no difference between us. They want to be happy. We want to be happy. They don't want to suffer. We don't want to suffer. No matter what they look like, no matter how they appear, no matter what we think of them. In fact, all their decisions, everything that they do, just like everything that we do, is to pursue this feeling good and avoid suffering. And their happiness is no less important to them than my happiness is to me. And their suffering doesn't hurt any less than mine does. However, others are infinite, and I am only one. So, whose happiness and suffering is more important? My small, tiny, irritation, or that of all these beings? So if they're more important, why do I focus on me all the time? And when I do that, when I make self-centeredness the focus, it creates so many problems. I create walls between myself and others, because I'm always worrying about what I want, how I am more important, and not taking others into consideration. I become mistrustful of others, that they're going to take what I want, what I have. So much worry and anxiety. It creates conflicts. They don't like me. I have all these expectations of others, that they will say nice things to me, respect me, treat me well, take care of my needs. And then when they don't, I get angry and hurt and overly sensitive. Even a small, word wrong creates so much pain for me, because it's all about me. And because I reject others, they appear negative to me. And then I see only faults in them, which creates hatred, which disturbs my mind. But if I were to shift that, if I were to set aside my self-centeredness, then I would be more likely to bring happiness to others, which would then bring happiness to me. They would be more relaxed, more loving, more easily generous. When we practice acts of kindness and generosity, we end up feeling good about ourselves. And then we feel good about others. When we start to cherish others more, we see that we exist as connected to others. And this is more in harmony with how we actually exist. which is more soothing to the mind, not in discord, in accord. Through practicing this cherishing of others, seeing others as greater than ourselves, more important than ourselves, we decrease that self-centeredness, that self-grasping that keeps us stuck in samsara. It challenges that concrete self-grasping view of self. When we start caring about others, it takes the focus away from that me, and our perspective widens. Our minds open. Even our problems don't appear so bad. They don't bother us so much. We can be comfortable anywhere because what we're focusing on is not our own comfort, but on benefiting others, on making others happy. And you can do that anywhere, in any horrible situation, in any positive situation. When we cherish others, we feel close to them. It becomes easier even to say some difficult things like setting boundaries or being honest, because there's an underlying feeling of love for the other person. And we can even develop courage and strength and confidence because we know that this is the best decision or the best thing for all of us. Our practice becomes stronger and stronger. We become more committed to developing ourselves to benefit those beings that we love so much. And as a side benefit, we attain all our precious, greater than wish fulfilling jewel benefits. So then we dedicate May this meditation, this teaching, these contemplations that we've been doing have a positive effect for the people of Ukraine and the political leaders of Russia. May it bring all of us to that greatest happiness of enlightenment as quickly as possible. Okay. So if there are any questions, we can take questions now.
Hi, Venerable. How are
Hi,
you?
Good.
So good to hear from you after.
Yes, nice to see you too. It's been a long break, too long.
Yeah. My question is, oftentimes when we dedicate or when we are exchanging self with others, there's this concept of all, or like all sentient beings. How is that something I can bring my mind to work with without it going too fast or too slow?
Yeah. I had one person said to me, I think it was some teacher, I don't remember which teacher, but she or he said, all sentient beings are the beings who are in front of you. So we can bring it very concrete to this, recognition that the person that I'm living with who, might be really irritating is actually all sentient beings. So that really helps. Like they're right there. And, it's not like this imaginary, abstract sort of everybody kind of concept, because that's easy to say, all sentient beings, no problem, right? But when I bring it into this person in front of me, this person who is waiting on me, this person who is irritating me, this person, like this, that they're all sentient beings, then it becomes much easier to feel that love and compassion and commitment and so forth to them. Yeah. Even for me lately, the people on the news become all sentient beings. Yeah.
So it's sort of like opening the limitations of that, the concept that body does not make them only one person.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you.
Happy birthday, Anil.
Yeah, hi, Drolma. Thank you very much. The only thing I want to say thank you. I attended your 10 days online course for training the mind. Before I started that course, I was really struggling. I was just looking. I couldn't find, and finally I found you. The only thing I want to say is thank you very much. You already helped me. I came to Tushita, but because of the lockdown, it was closed. I couldn't see you as in person, but you helped me in uh, in a way I was looking for. Thank you, and God bless you. Keep shining.
Thank you. Thank you. And it's my teachers, and I'm just, one drop in all the, that whole FPMT and Tushita, and it's like it's not just me. I wouldn't be who I am without all these others. But yeah, I'm glad you can, benefit from it. Now you're a part of it too. The mandala, we call it.
Yeah, true. Like the first time I watched your video, like I repeated and added, and I was surprised to the fact that like even second time when I watch it, I actually analyze that couple of things I missed in the first step because my mind was not centered. So I went again, I tried again, and then finally I can see things, I can think clearly. It is my, say, first step, and you helped me through it.
Great. That's amazing. That's wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
That's it? No questions? No more? Yeah. Anil?
Venerable, the question is, are these the 8 sutras that we are referring to? The 8 sutras.
So sutra, the way I've been taught is sutra means a whole text. So this would be, and sutras are considered the words of the Buddha. So when you say sutra is the words of the Buddha, Shastra is a commentary on the teachings of the Buddha. So this would actually be considered a Shastra because it's a commentary. Yeah.
Right, Venerable. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Sure.
I can ask another question.
Sure.
Yeah. So oftentimes when I'm faced with a difficult situation, like someone is critical of me, I'm trying now to kind of I think I heard a Rinpoche say that we can use that to defeat the self-cherishing ego, using the harsh words directly to cut through that. But it's such the balance. How does one find the balance between self-blame, like blaming that I'm actually at fault, versus defeating the self-cherishing ego? I don't know if that makes sense.
So, I mean, one can take responsibility if you've said something. Is this a situation where you've actually said something that was unkind and you recognize it?
I can see how there could be an entire pattern of events leading up to that. But usually, I mean, in this situation, I was silent. I didn't really say much, but I'm at the receiving end of a lot of criticism, because people don't really, I don't know, sometimes they just pick on you. So
Yeah, sure. So we're going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but the way, first of all, of course, using your own, evaluation, if there's something you need to regret, that you actually did or apologize for, you can, use your discrimination. But regret is not, it's not a good idea if regret turns into this self-blame, where then you're a horrible person, you're worthless, you're nothing because you did this, you made this mistake. If you did something, and this, I mean, so two ways to look at it. Did you do something right now? But definitely you did something because you wouldn't receive the criticism, the karmic result of the negative action unless you had done something, but maybe not in this life and maybe not with this person. So first we're looking at this one, and you don't want to take regret to a point where it makes that self, that concrete sense of self, a bad person. Okay, that's what we often do, is we make a mistake, and then we take that concrete sense of self and we label it bad, and then that's that second type of pride I was talking about, where then this concrete sense of self is like horrible and, can't do anything, and it makes you just feel bad. You just feel bad all the time because of that, right? So that's an incorrect sense of self. Regretting, purifying, moving on is what we do. Now, the other thing that we do with, there's lots of things we can do with those words, is one, we can see it as the emptiness of the words, that the words are simply sounds, right? They're movements in the air that are coming to my ear. So where is their essence of their ability to hurt me? Where is their essence of being a bad thing? Right? It's all the way I have interpreted it. It's the way I have judged it to be. And then based on that judgment, then I feel bad, or or it hurts me. And so seeing, looking for the essence of the words can help us to start to break up that sense of how they can hurt us, trying to find the essence, because there is none, right? It's empty in the way it appears. And then tomorrow we'll talk more about the others. Okay.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Venerable Drolma, there is it's 3 questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them, or would you like to have a look at them yourself and choose whichever from one person?
Read them one at a time.
Sure. We cannot be disconnected from others, but yet at the time of death, we walk our own. Is there a contradiction there?
So even at the time of death, you don't walk your own. I think it's what makes death so difficult is this view that that we are all separate from others. But if we look at death as a transformation, as a change, what is actually happening, right, is that the body is being let go of. We're letting go of the body, but the mind is going on. And the mind that is going on is still the product of all the interactions we've had, all the positive and negative actions that we've done in relation to others. So in fact, we are not separate. And then if we start talking about enlightened beings, how they are present with us, our teachers and so forth, we aren't actually alone. And then this sense of at the time of death that, that it's the concrete self that is, that we are so afraid of losing at the time of death. But that self, that sense of a me that is permanent, unchanging, absolute, that doesn't actually exist. What exists is a label on this constantly changing body and mind. So if we let the body go and the mind keeps changing, well, there's still me, right? It's just not as absolute or as concrete, and it's still interconnected with all beings. So so I hope that was helpful.
The second question, I think, connects with the third one, so I try to put them together. The second question is, how is low self-esteem a hindrance? And she's going further, saying we have this Buddha mind, which is a method to overcome low self-esteem. But if we think it takes eons to become a Buddha, how can we gain further confidence?
Yeah, good question. Well, one way you can look at it is having achieved this precious human life that we have. And a precious human life is one in which we are born human, but we also have met the Dharma and we're interested in growing and so forth. And this is a very rare like very, it doesn't happen in this mind stream often, almost never. So that means that even though it takes eons to become enlightened, you must have gotten more than halfway of these eons. I mean, in order to be here now, to be, have the karma, the situation, have this precious human life where you're listening to these teachings and you're interested and you're studying, and there, Tibetan Buddhism still exists in the world. The Dalai Lama is still alive. It's incredible. Recognizing that, then you see you have like, you're, over the mountain, and all you have to do is go the rest of the way. So it's your view, isn't it? You could see yourself as at the bottom of the mountain, and now I have to climb this mountain. But if you really look at it in your situation right now, you're like beyond by having the situation right now. You just don't want to misuse it, right? You don't want to get stuck and not be able to go further forward. That's why you got to use it so much now. But seeing it as like far and far and far away isn't helpful. I was reading a book recently that talked about, sometimes we can get discouraged, especially if we study these incredible spiritually realized masters and think, I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to be that, be that in this lifetime. But we just don't know, we can't know because we don't have that perception of how far, how much we've already purified, and how much we are purifying in this moment just by what we're doing. We don't know how far. And when they talk about eons, this was another thing they talked about with the bodhisattvas, and Geshe Namdak's been talking about this lately, about how this idea of 3 countless eons to get enlightened, and that there was a bodhisattva who his virtue was so powerful that he could cover an eon like in a really short amount of time. I don't remember exactly what it was, but this idea of eon and being stuck in a concrete, it's got to be day after day after day, when eons can be accomplished in a moment because of the power of the teachings, because of the power of our practice. So I would see it that way as well too. We see eons as, years and years and years and years, but it doesn't necessarily have to be seen that way. Anushree, would you want to take the next one? Hello.
Yeah. Hello. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So one was that eons thing only. I was thinking about it. It depends on the strength of our sadhana and practice, right? How quickly or how slowly we will achieve our goal, isn't it? So I just wanted to confirm. Yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it. Part of it is definitely our own heartfelt, the work that we do. But as we do our sadhanas and we do our practice, we start to create the conditions for all the supportive karmas that we've ever developed to also manifest. Okay, so that's one thing. Not only are we creating the karmas for the positive to happen to us, but we're also having other karmas that become ripened because of what we're doing. Okay. The other aspect that we're doing is when we do our sadhanas, we're bringing in the power of these incredible beings who can also benefit us. So, and this is something we can't necessarily see. So it's also all the support of all of our teachers and all the Buddhas. So it's not just us. No, we're powerful and we're the main cause, but all those conditions can be very, very helpful.
Yeah. So another question, like I was reading this book, and Siddhartha realized that even the self exists only on a relative level, just like a mirage. So what does that mean? Like the self exists on a relative level, like a mirage. What does it mean?
Yeah. It means that the self comes together through a combination of causes and conditions. So a mirage is like, the hot pavement and the sun shining in a certain way, and then it makes it look like water. Even though there isn't any actual water, it looks like there is water. So the self is the same in the sense of all these causes and conditions of, my body, my mind, all my interactions, my parents, all the food I've eaten, all the things I've learned, all these things come together. And then that what appears is a self, a me. But when we start to look, just like when you start to look at a mirage more closely, you don't see any actual water there. When you start to analyze, look closely for an essential self, there isn't one. When you look, there appears, and one appears and it looks like it and it can function. It's definitely there in the sense of on this relative level. But when you look deeper, there's no concreteness to it, no separateness to it. That's how it's like a mirage.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah. And yeah, so like just one question. So it's a thing like when we do sadhana, when we engage in any kind of positive action, Buddhist practice, so the Buddhist deities and all the heavenly beings, they come to our like they come to not exactly a rescue, but they come to protect us, right, from our downfall. So is this a, and then suppose we have some bad karma which we have to face while and we are practicing Buddhism also, so that the intensity of that intensity of the consequences, that those bad effects, it is lessened, isn't it? Because we have that we are developing we are calling for the Buddha nature, and so the intensity is lessened, isn't it? Is that true?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, just wanted to ask, answer. Okay, thank you so much. Yeah,
Sure. Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you so much. I really have enjoyed your presentation and your speech. So I'm actually in Oregon, in the U.S. Yeah, and I'm actually somewhat trained in mental health field as well. And the reason I say that is because possibly I'm misinterpreting the word attachment, because I feel like when I see that word, I know for myself, kind of the struggle is like a sense of belonging and like attachment to others. And then there's like this alone feeling sometimes, especially it's like, okay, like coming back to, just really focusing on what I can do. And so there's just seems to be a bit of a push and pull, a paradox there. And I don't know if it's the word attachment that I'm stuck on, or yeah, if you could speak to that.
Yeah. I think that a better word for the positive, what you're talking about, is connection. I think that we want connection, and typically, unfortunately, with our delusions, connection automatically becomes attachment. And attachment is a negative in the Buddhist sense. It's not that we become disconnected from others when we release our attachment. It's an exaggeration of how we exist and what we can, like, the positive feelings. The positive feelings come from others. That's the exaggeration. Okay. So attachment is when we're relying on others to feel good about ourselves instead of working, and we can be connected to someone else and still feel good about ourselves, whether we're connected to them or not. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what I'm hearing you say is like being able to have that sense of connection, even if I'm not having it in the present moment with somebody. Because there are people that I do love that love me. And even though they're not around, just like I love people, even if they're not around, it doesn't mean that. So makes me think of a little bit playing with time and like more about the present moment, and recognizing that even if they're not there in this present moment, there'll be other present moments when I'll have connection. And I have had them before.
Yes. Yes. And recognizing we cannot not be connected.
Right. That seems to be my next step. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you. Where in Oregon are you? Oh, did I mute her?
No, I did it. I'm in Eugene, Oregon.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Where were you at when you were here?
I was in Portland. Yeah, that's
Beautiful.
where Michigan is. Yeah, Eugene is very pretty. The whole state is gorgeous. Gorgeous.
Yeah, I just moved here from California and I'm very
Oh.
much enjoying it. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Hello.
Yeah, good evening, gentlemen. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for the session today. And I just want to have my question. So due to our family life, we have several commitments on a day-to-day basis and have very limited time to practice. So though we have a motivation, sometimes we feel doubtful whether this little practice is going to get us anywhere close to what we talk about enlightenment or at least understanding the true nature. How do we overcome this doubtful nature and continue our practice in a motivated way?
Yeah, good question. So what you can do is, and this is so we talk about formal practice when you're sitting on the cushion, right? Or saying prayers or doing meditation. And then we talk off the cushion, right? When you're interacting with others. Okay. Now, these two are both practice. Okay. Sitting on the cushion is practice. Off the cushion is also practice. Actually, off the cushion, when you're interacting with others, is more important than on the cushion. I mean, we need both if we can, but there are times in our lives, especially when you're raising children, right? Middle age and so forth, when your practice is off the cushion more than on the cushion. And so every time that you are generous, that you are kind, that you put someone else first, that you consider the illusion-like nature of things, even though you are washing the dishes or, changing the nappies or whatever, that this is also practice. And so what we do when we have all this busyness and this going is that we try to bring our awareness, our mindfulness of whatever teachings we have in our minds while we're doing those things, while we're in those things, and recognizing that this is also practice. So it's so you can do it while you're very busy. You can be busy and still, because it's something that you're doing with your mind, you can be present in this moment and just take, it's half a second to consider a different point of view, or to shift your focus. Like you do what you're doing, and then for a moment you step back and you do this internal thing, not for an hour on the cushion, but just in that moment. And that actually is very powerful when it comes to how you're interacting with others and and that's where you're developing, you're creating good karma, you're starting to apply the teachings. This is, it's, what do they call it? Feet on the ground, or rubber, where the rubber meets the road. Those are some sayings of where, the practical application of the teachings gets done. And that's powerful, powerful stuff.
Just a follow-up question. So when we do the routine work, what we do, as you said, our mind doesn't really pay attention. It just goes into the mode where we know that work. So it's not something new for us to do. So it's like it's in pilot mode. So it automatically works on it. So how do we switch this often Is it like we have to do a concentrated effort to switch it,
Yeah.
or just hearing a Dharma talk while attending to your kid? Is that even okay? Or
Yes. It's good. Yeah, it's fine. Playing mantras, listening to Dharma talks while you're doing what you're doing. They call it in psychology, they call it anchoring. So anchoring is like whenever you walk through a door, there's something that cues you. You decide that every time I walk through the door, I'm going to think about this. So every time you walk through a door, you do it, or you put up notes, or like you set an alarm, and every hour when it rings, you do, like, that's what they do with Thich Nhat Hanh and his communities. Every hour the bell rings, you pause for a minute and come back and you do that centering thing. So it's any technique that works for you. But yes, it's fine to listen to Dharma talks while you're doing other stuff. It's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay. Hello, I just had one more question. So it is regarding the first seal. So now the first seal states that all assembled phenomena are impermanent. And as a self is also a result of causes and conditions coming together. So a self is also an assembled phenomena, and that is also impermanent. So then what is it that endures? What is that is not impermanent?
Okay. So the difficulty when we talk about permanent and impermanent is that in the Buddhist definition of permanent and impermanent, what we're talking about here is not the lack of endurance, not the lack of existing forever. We're talking about constantly changing nature. Okay. So when we say that all phenomena are impermanent, all compounded, I don't know how you said it, compounded, putting together, I can't remember the word, but compounded is what the way I usually, all, phenomena that are the product of causes and conditions are impermanent, means that they change all the time. Okay. Now, this sense of something being eternal, like a mind being eternal, but at the same time changing all the time, that's what that seal is talking about. It's impermanence, it's changing nature. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, so thank you so much. And so impermanence in Buddhism doesn't mean death, it means momentary change, like, changing. Right. So a mind is eternal and it is constantly changing. So that is the changing nature is permanent kind of a thing.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah.
Sure. So maybe we stop there. What do you think?
Thank you so much, Venerable Drolma. Thank you so
Yes.
much for your teachings. It's great to have you back. And I think everybody's appreciating so much to have you back on Zoom, guiding us through 2 long years.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Yeah, welcome. And so we'll do it again tomorrow. So same time. And yeah, we'll do the rest of the verses.
That's right. We have 4 verses left.
Mhm.
Yes. Thank you so much, Venerable Drolma.
Okay.
Venerable Drolma, would you like to dedicate? And
Again, sure.
oh, sorry.
It's fine. I usually dedicate after the meditation because I always forget at the end, but yeah, we can dedicate.
Okay.
Yeah, well, it never hurts. With dedication, we send out this all this positive energy that we've created, and we dedicate it, meaning we give it to specific causes. And the dedication that we, the karma that we created with the dedication doesn't disappear until those causes are fulfilled, until those results come about. So we dedicate for, world peace, and we dedicate for our own and others enlightenment, full enlightenment. Yep, and anything else, all the conditions you need to practice, any difficulties family members are having, or friends, or yeah, anything you want to see change in the world, we dedicate for that. Okay.
Thank you so much, Venerable Drolma, and see you tomorrow. And for everybody else, have a good, well, in India, a good afternoon, almost evening. In America, so you have a whole day in front of you. For Europe, it's lunchtime. And today we have another teaching coming up at 9 o'clock Indian time. We have Venerable Thupten Chodron, who is a very well-known teacher, one of Lama Yeshe's old students, and she will tell us story time again, since we're still on the Losar days and remembering our spiritual teacher. And she will be a great one to tell stories because she is one of the first students of Lama Yeshe. So we will have her at 9 p.m. Indian time. Please join us, and please join us tomorrow again for Venerable Drolma at 5 p.m. Indian time. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Venerable Drolma.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank
Tomorrow.
you. See you.